Good morning to you all. A lovely calm but cool morning on the South Wales coast, and we are back at Kenfig. Came here almost to the day 12 months ago, 30 odd degrees of heat, but nonetheless a fantastic site, and I've always wanted to come back, mainly because I talked so much rubbish on the last video that it's always irritated me. I wanted to come back and try to talk less rubbish, but enjoy what is probably the country's finest orchid site as far as I'm concerned. So I'm looking forward to trying to make some sense of what I see today without being too ambitious. So let's kick on and take on whatever Kenfig has to offer, and that's a hell of a lot. That's what we're up against this morning. All the paths, well not all of them, but most of them so far, are flooded and impassable, which is stopping me getting to where I want to get to. I'm just going to have to keep going round until I make it. Oh, it's hard work to get through to the June slacks, which is where the orchids are, because all the paths are flooded. I'm having to go a long way round here on unfamiliar footpaths, but at least there's a bit of colour starting to turn up. That's quite a rich colour. Very dark that is. There are supposedly a small number of northern marsh orchids here. I didn't see any last year. From a distance I thought this had the colour. It doesn't have the flower shape though, so it's a southern marsh orchid. Richly coloured. A more orthodox southern marsh orchid. The first of the slightly weird ones, I mean. No spots on leaves, two very distinct loops. You probably could call it a Wintonii hybrid between southern marsh and early marsh. But I don't know, so there's no spots on the leaves, otherwise I might suggest otherwise, but those markings are very distinct. Oh, hallelujah. Clambered over the higher ground to get to one of the big scrapes, or June slacks to give them their correct term, and that's where the orchid should be, and indeed it is. It's the remnants of an early marsh orchid. We're very late for these now. I'm sure we'll find some. I would suggest that was before fading and incarnata form, the pinkish coloured one. It's a very nice pale southern marsh orchid. That's a Grandees hybrid, spotty leaves. Another northern marsh orchid wannabe, but it's a southern marsh orchid. It's just nicked the colouring. Coccinea form of the early marsh orchid. Should be quite a lot of these around. There were last year. That's a nicely coloured, nicely patterned southern marsh orchid. Here's another interesting one. Make your call on that one. Spotted leaves, so common spotteds in there. The looping and a little tiny loop at the bottom of the flower. Yeah, it's kind of early marshish, so on the face of it, it's a Kernerorum hybrid between common spotted and early marsh orchid. That's what I would favour at the moment. If it isn't, it's just a plain old Grandees hybrid, but it's short. Nothing like most Grandees hybrids. I think it's a Kernerorum. I'm almost certainly going to call that as a Kernerorum. Another typical Kenfig, name that orchid. Another short one, beautifully smooth, clean, unmarked leaves, and all there is on the flower are 2 loops, so I can see early marsh in it. It's not an early marsh. I can see southern marsh in it, in the flower shape, so I think it's a cross between the two, which is a Wintonii hybrid. Can't see that it can be anything else. Just to prove they do exist, spotty leaves, solid stem, common spotted orchid. No arguments with that one. That's a lovely pale, even pink southern marsh orchid. Very nice indeed. Nice little Coccinea early marsh. Not too many at the moment of these, but I'm sure they'll catch up in numbers. I'm not sure if I saw a northern marsh orchid it would be any more intensely coloured than this one. But it's another southern marsh orchid. They range in colour here phenomenally. I've never seen a white. I've seen a very pale one. And then they go right off the scale at the top end to these sort of intense dark purples. I'm going to grab this one in case we don't see any more. I'm sure we will. Marsh Helleborine, just coming out, just starting to flower. It's a bit early for them, but we did see them last year at this time, so we should bump into a few. Common spotted orchid. I did wonder if it's something else, but spotted leaves, so I'm going to stick with common spotted orchid. Saw this one from a distance and I thought it was a burnt tip orchid, which is silly because they don't grow here, but the colour scheme was right. It's just a faded incarnata early marsh, I think. Don't think it's a faded Coccinea. Could be though. On the face of it, it's a southern marsh orchid. It can't be anything but a southern marsh orchid because there's no marks on the leaves. It's a big hollow stem. Look at those markings. There's only a textbook out there that shows markings like that on a southern marsh orchid. They're loops. Could be common spotted, could be early marsh, but you wouldn't say they were southern marsh, but that's what it is. It's a Kenfig. Kenfig southern marsh. Defies the books. A nice rustic early marsh orchid. That's the good thing about Coccinea forms, is they've got a lot of fading to do from bright red to just about cream white. And some of the colours they go through are very nice. Oldie worldy, shabby chic colour. But that is a faded Coccinea early marsh orchid. Going to head over and see if we can find a fen orchid. It's got to be done. Even though I'm one of those that aren't too fussed about them. Not the most spectacular of orchids, but they are extremely rare. This is one of the very few sites that you can see a fen orchid at. I just happened to have seen one or two of the others over in Norfolk a few years ago, so I sort of broke my duck back then, and I did see, I think, 1 or 2 here last year. Others saw more. Not easy to see. Need to tread carefully, but yeah, we'll have a look. Can't find any fen orchids, but there's plenty of colourful little ones around. Like this cute Coccinea form of early marsh. Struth, look at the colour on that. That's what you call vibrant. Nope, can't find any fen orchids at all. I'm not too concerned. Last year they had a couple of bamboo sticks in marking a couple of the plants, which obviously makes it a bit easier for people like me. There's no bamboo sticks this year. It's very wet. Last year it was baked hard and dry in 30 degrees of heat. It's squelchy wet at the moment. Whether that's got anything to do with it at all, I haven't got a clue. But no, I couldn't find any, and I wasn't going to get any wetter crawling around, so I'll keep looking on the way around, but I think this is the main site, and I couldn't see any. But plenty of crazy Dactylorhizas to continue digging out, so off we go. One of the big June slacks right in front of us with the shorter grass, which is where all the orchids grow here, all the Dactylorhizas. At most sites I visit, I like to check every inch of the site, because I always think if I miss a corner, that's where the good one will be and I missed it. But you can't do that here at Kenfig, otherwise you'd be here for 48 hours without sleep. But you just do your best to cover broadly every inch of the ground, but there's always a chance you're going to miss something. Common spotted orchid, very much the minority on this site. There are common spotted orchids obviously, but not huge numbers, and as a result there aren't really huge numbers of Grandees hybrids, certainly not in the shallows that we've seen so far. That's nice. It's a southern marsh orchid on the face of it. Yeah, it's a southern marsh orchid. There's no spots on the leaves at all. That one's definitely going online with a desperate appeal for an ID. I mean, look at those intense markings in the centre. It certainly isn't southern marsh orchid. I didn't think there was any markings on the leaves, but actually there are spots on the leaves. Not many, but there are spots on the leaves, so good. I mean, God only knows what it is. On the face of it, it's Grandees, it's southern marsh and common spotted, but I've never seen one looking like that before. That's probably what it'll come back as. But it's tiny, it's about 4 inches tall. It isn't really classic Grandees territory. Typical Kenfig hybrid, that one. As in, nobody knows what the hell it is. Very nice though. Bit of a take two on this one. I've just had a closer look at the leaves. I'm not totally convinced they are spots. They could just be blemishes. And it's only on one of the leaves. The other leaves are clean, so I think that could be false in terms of common spotted leaves. So that sort of opens it up, as still doesn't tell me what it is. Another nice one. To me, they're classic early marsh orchid markings on a small, stumpy southern marsh. I think that's a Wintonii hybrid. Others may differ, but that's what I'm going for. Seems quite clear to me. Another nice one. It appears, to my eyes, on the markings, to have early marsh in it, with on southern marsh flower, and therefore a Wintonii hybrid, but you know, it's not 100% that one. The flowers near the top appear to have stronger loop markings than those lower down. It could just be a small southern marsh orchid. I'll sit on the fence on that one. Interesting one. Definitely marsh orchid. Signs of early marsh orchid in those leaves as well, I believe. Most definitely early marsh orchid markings on a southern marsh orchid flower. So that is a Wintonii hybrid. In my honest opinion, in my humble opinion, it's got to be. Very nice as well. Nice blend of pinks and purples and whites on what appears to be just a southern marsh orchid. A very nice one. Another of those orchids that get you in trouble here if you start talking about what they are. Nothing down below really that suggests it's anything but a southern marsh, although I don't know if those hooks on the end of the leaves might suggest something else, and the markings, again, early marsh looking markings, so easy to believe that's a Wintonii hybrid. Might seek some opinions on that. That's a good one. That is interesting. That is a Kenfig weirdo. Not seen one with this colour anywhere on the site so far today. I don't know how I'd describe that. It's Southern Marsh with early Marsh in it, but I don't know. There's a fairly prominent lobe on the bottom, would even suggest common spotted, but there's definitely no spots on the leaves. It's a marsh orchid stem, so yeah, Wintonii hybrids becoming the fallback default call on some of these, but unusual colour. Again, I might seek some opinions on this one. Kenfig hybrid, probably just the Southern Marsh. Nothing too much weird going on down below. But yeah, just appreciate that one as a Southern Marsh or just a plain Kenfig weirdo. Another boldly, intensely marked something. About 4 or 5 inches tall, that. Another one of those delightful sort of soft pink, lilac and white Southern Marsh orchids. Very nice. What a belter. Another one of these with very bold markings. Now this one is definitely got common spotted in it. There are consistent spotted markings on the leaves. So there's a common spotted in there, and it looks like a Southern Marsh orchid shaped flower, but the intensity of the markings, I mean, blimey, if we were up north we'd be saying, you know, Northern Marsh orchid, cross common spotted, but I think it's a Grandees hybrid, but with intense common spotted markings on there. It's almost like a Rhodochilla common spotted has messed around with a Southern Marsh, but at the moment ticks the boxes for Grandees hybrid. That's nice. I was going to say it's an incarnata form of early Marsh, but I think it's probably a faded coccinea form. It gets very difficult. The coccineas fade so fast. They go through the colour spectrum of the incarnata, and then you're struggling really. So it could be either. It's just nicely coloured because it's consistent from top to bottom, whereas the coccineas tend to still be holding colour at the top, but not the bottom. I suspect this could be an incarnata form. Nice little coccinea early Marsh. And an even nicer one next door, which is tiny. Very small, common spotted orchid leaves and marsh orchid stem, Southern Marsh orchid flower, common spotted orchid markings, Grandees hybrid. Another one of those delightfully marked midget orchids, about 3 inches tall, with bold markings. It's got spotty leaves, so there's a common spotted in there on a Southern Marsh flower. It just doesn't look like a Grandees hybrid, but strictly speaking, that's what it is. Just grabbing a few shots of the leaves on these because I really am quite clueless as to what these are, and those leaves might give somebody more knowledgeable than I am a clue as to what it is. It is a beautifully marked orchid on what looks to be a Southern Marsh orchid base. No spots on the leaves, and again those very intensely dark purple markings. If they weren't dark, you might just say it was a Southern Marsh orchid, but something not right with these. Very nice orchids though. And another one, that's got to be early Marsh orchid markings in that. Surely spotted leaves. Wintonii hybrid. The fascinating thing about these is a sort of almost consistency with these
almost dark reddish markings on the flowers, but the leaves sometimes are completely unmarked and other times they're covered in spots. It's almost like they do their own thing regardless of what's going on the flower. It's very strange, which kind of sums up Kenfig really. That's a nice light southern marsh orchid. Nothing complicated with that one, just good to see. Nice coquinia, early marsh orchid, holding on to its colour well. .9% of the marsh helleborines are not quite open yet. They were last year at this time, but they're running a little bit later this time around. This one's got 2 flowers open, so it's probably the best I've seen so far. Nice, pure, pale, small southern marsh orchid. Sitting alongside, by a matter of inches, something. This one has spots on the leaves, southern marsh shaped flowers, bulb markings. It's a Grandis hybrid. I'm coming to the conclusion these bulb markings are a red herring really. It's just a Kenfig thing. They appear on some of the pure plants. Some of the pure southern marsh have this bulb marking. Some of the hybrid southern marsh plus common spotted, or indeed any of the hybrids, also on occasions are using the same bulb markings. It's just a Kenfig thing. Lovely patterning on that southern marsh. Full width spots. That's a lovely colouring. Just a pale southern marsh, but very nice. Another full-bodied, spotted southern marsh orchid. I mean, strictly speaking, southern marsh spots tend to run down the middle, but as you can see with the flowers, particularly near the top of this one, they really spread from left wing to right wing, but it's just a southern marsh Kenfig version.
I bumped into 3 or 4 orchid hunters in the last hour, which is nice and good. Didn't see any last year when I was here. Consensus of opinion, it seems to be that it's not as good this year as last year. As I said earlier, last year it was bone dry, very hot. After a wet spring, maybe it was perfect conditions, and it's very, very wet this year. Very, very wet. It's been understanding water in parts, and yeah, I think it's not as good as last year, but I tell you what, it is still astonishing. It is still, for me, a million miles bigger, better, more spectacular than any orchid site I've seen anywhere in the country. And if you've never been here, even on a slightly subdued season like this one for Kenfig, it will blow you away. It's well worth the trip. It's in the middle of nowhere really, but it's still worth the effort if you're even remotely heading towards Wales or even the borders. Get over here, it's still stunning. So yeah, it might be slightly down, but there's still some fantastic orchids here, and it's still impossible to make sense of most of them. And I'm going to break for some lunch now and grab a cup of tea from my flask, as us old folks do, and then I'll be continuing. Right, off we go, suitably watered and filled up, refueled. Another June slack before us. All you can do with these is to treat it like you're mowing the lawn. Head from one end to the other, turn around and come down the next line and keep doing so. That way you hopefully won't miss anything.
Nicely marked southern marsh orchid. I mean, often textbooks show it's just dots down the middle of a southern marsh orchid down the throat. That's the sort of classic ID, but they are variable, and the more knowledgeable orchid types will tell you they're extremely variable, and this probably underlines that. I mean, the flowers have got clear lines on, all sorts of shapes. You start to think, oh, I can see common spotted in there and whatever. I mean, it's a pure southern marsh orchid, absolutely 100% southern marsh, and just goes to show really, you can get lines, you can get spots, you can get lines and spots on a southern marsh orchid. Always look at the leaves first is my advice. Definitely one of these I'll walk away from. It appears to have spotted leaves. It appears to have early marsh orchid sacs on there, although they could be just common spotted. And the flower shape is southern marsh. I think it's one of these unusual Kenfig grandis hybrids. You can see a bit of everything, but I think it's just common spotted and southern marsh. Another of those lovely pale ones just behind, if I can get through to it. Bear with me. I do like these. Southern marsh orchid. Crazy. And wonderful in equal parts. Spotty leaves. I think southern marsh flower. Grandis hybrid with nice markings on it.
You're kidding me? Surely not.
That is a fen orchid. What it's doing here, I don't really know. There it is, a Kenfig fen orchid in a completely new location to anything I've seen before. But good to see. Discovered a Coccinea marsh orchid swamp here. Very, very wet, but these seem to love it, and I don't mind that.
Okay, they're not orchids, but if the world was devoid of orchids, I'd be chasing after these. The Viper's Bugloss, to give it its common name. Always have loved these. So few true blue colours in the wild. Magnificent. Coccinea marsh orchids everywhere.
Another of those mid-colour range early marsh orchids that could be incarnata or coccinea. I'm going to call that a coccinea, sorry. A faded coccinea, early marsh orchid. Very nice colour still. No fading going on with that one. Not yet anyway.
Right, that's it, down on the beach, good place to finish. That's Kenfig 2024 for you. Very wet, very damp, but didn't spoil it. It was still a fantastic place with some fantastic orchids, some of which I made sense of, most of which I didn't, but that's Kenfig for you. So I hope you enjoyed some of it. Thank you very much for coming along as ever. I'm heading back home tomorrow ahead of the rains, heading west to east, but I will be stopping on the way at a very special site with very special orchids in that I am dying to see. So I will share all with you in the next video, so hopefully we'll see you very soon.